Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Henri van Breda? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I will put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Henri Christo van Breda was born on November 1, 1994, in Pretoria, South Africa. He lived with his father Martin, his mother Teresa, his older brother Rudy, and his younger sister Marley. Henri's parents were wealthy, and the family had a comfortable lifestyle. In early 2006, the family moved to Perth, Australia. In 2013, Henri went to a college in the city of Melbourne and studied physics. Rudy was already attending that same college. During that year, the Van Breda family moved to a small town north of Brisbane, so they went from the west coast of Australia all the way to the east coast. Henri's father Martin ran a real estate business there. In January 2014, Martin, Teresa, and Marley moved back to South Africa. Henri and Rudy stayed in Melbourne, where they continued their studies. In August 2014, after deciding to take a break from college, Henri moved to Stellenbosch, South Africa. He lived with his parents in a 4-bedroom house in an upscale neighborhood. In response to South Africa's extremely high crime rate, many neighborhoods there have robust security measures. This neighborhood was no exception and featured security guards, a fence, and surveillance cameras. In December 2014, Henri's brother Rudy traveled from Australia to South Africa to visit his family. He was on break from college. Rudy intended on returning to Australia in February 2015, but as it turns out, he would never make this trip. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. On January 27, 2015, at 7:12 a.m., 20-year-old Henri van Breda called emergency services and told the operator that he and his family were attacked by a guy with an axe. He did not seem to be particularly distressed on the phone call. He was calm and stated information in a matter-of-fact way. Henri remained on the phone for 25 minutes. The operator thought it was a hoax because of Henri's unusual demeanor. When the police arrived to the Van Breda home, they found 3 of the family members dead: 54-year-old Martin, 55-year-old Teresa, and 23-year-old Rudy. Henri's 16-year-old sister Marley had sustained severe head trauma and had no memory of what happened. As for Henri, he was in pretty good shape, having only sustained minor injuries. Here is what Henri told the police. On the night before the murders, he, his father Martin, and his brother Rudy watched the 2013 movie Star Trek Into the Darkness. When the movie was over, everybody in the house went to sleep on the second floor, but Henri was still awake. He went into the bathroom and played games on his cell phone. The lights were off in the bathroom. When he was in there, he heard banging sounds, which startled him. As he moved to the bathroom door to take a look, he could see the silhouette of someone standing next to Rudy's bed in the room that Henri shared with his brother. This unknown assailant was attacking Rudy with an axe. As Henri remained frozen in the bathroom, Henri's father Martin entered the bedroom and attempted to fight off the attacker. He was unsuccessful. The attacker laughed as he struck Martin with the axe. The mysterious intruder then attacked Henri's mother Teresa and his sister Marley. When he was done, the attacker returned to the bedroom where Rudy had been attacked. By this point, Henri was standing near the bottom of his own bed. The attacker was laughing and did not appear to be concerned that Henri was standing there. Henri went on the offensive and took the axe away from the attacker, but the attacker produced a knife. The men engaged in a life-and-death struggle. Henri was cut and stabbed. However, he managed to fight off the attacker. As the attacker fled, Henri pursued him, but he slipped and fell down the staircase. Henri believed there were at least 2 intruders in the house. He could not identify the attacker because he was wearing a mask. At 4:24 a.m., Henri called his girlfriend Bianca, but she did not answer the phone. At this point, Henri passed out on the couch for 2 hours and 48 minutes from an epileptic seizure. When he woke up, he searched the internet for emergency numbers and called for help. The police immediately suspected that there were no intruders, and Henri was the killer. The theory of the crime was that Henri killed Rudy first, Martin intervened and was killed next. Henri then went after his mother and sister. On June 13, 2016, about a year and a half after the murders, Henri was arrested. On May 21, 2018, after a long trial, Henri van Breda was found guilty of 3 counts of murder, 1 count of attempted murder, and 1 count of defeating or obstructing the administration of justice. His sentencing was on June 7, 2018. For the murders, Henri received 3 terms of life in prison. For the attempted murder, 15 years, and for the obstruction charge, 1 year. In prison, Henri has had a rough time. According to a report by a mental health clinician, Henri discovered the hard way that prison can be violent. One time when Henri was walking near the hospital unit of the prison, he was attacked by men who wanted to see the contents of a bag he was carrying. Another inmate came to Henri's defense by wielding a condom dispenser he ripped off the wall and telling Henri to run behind the gate for the hospital unit. I guess the attacking inmates were afraid of getting rubber stamped. Henri learned that he could not count on condom dispenser facilitated rescues while in prison. He better find a more reliable form of protection. Now moving to my analysis. Henri van Breda maintains his innocence, and he has a few supporters. For example, while he was awaiting trial, Henri became romantically involved with a woman named Danielle. She believed that Henri was innocent and implied there was no evidence against him. The prosecution, of course, disagreed. They believed the evidence against Henri was overwhelming. This brings me to the question, was Henri guilty of murder? Let's take a look at the evidence both for and against the idea that he was guilty, starting with the inculpatory factors. Henri admitted to the police that he was addicted to methamphetamine. His parents were unhappy with his substance use and threatened to cut off his allowance. In the Van Breda house, 3 people were brutally murdered and 1 was seriously injured, yet Henri only had superficial cuts and minor stab wounds. Some of his cuts were parallel. He claimed that he fell down the staircase, yet he had no injuries consistent with that type of journey. According to Henri, an intruder killed his family members, and at least 1 other intruder was in the house. This seems unlikely given the level of security in the neighborhood where the family lived. There were security guards who patrolled on foot and in vehicles, surveillance cameras, thermal imaging cameras, an electric fence, and other security measures. On the night of the murders, there was no evidence that someone had penetrated the perimeter of the neighborhood. For example, there was no damage to the fences or the gates. The Van Breda residence was positioned right about in the middle of the neighborhood. If somebody did manage to get in, they would have probably targeted a house closer to the fence. An axe and a knife were used to commit the murders. Both these weapons came from the house. Why would the intruders have been unarmed, especially in South Africa, where many homeowners have firearms? If they were not carrying weapons, how did they make it past all these security measures? So they remembered the tools necessary to break into the neighborhood, but not weapons to carry out the attack? There was no forced entry into the house, and nothing was missing. There were valuables in plain view on the first floor, yet all the murders took place upstairs. From 10 p.m. on January 26 to 12:10 a.m. on January 27, a neighbor heard a loud argument from the Van Breda residence. It sounded like men were having a noisy fight with an aggressive undertone. The neighbor said it was not consistent with the Star Trek movie that Henri mentioned. There was no evidence that anyone else had been in the house. All the DNA, fingerprints, and footprints came from members of the family. DNA from Teresa and Rudy was found under Henri's fingernails, on his shorts, on his socks, and in a shower. Henri conveniently passed out for 2 hours and 48 minutes. He claimed he didn't know how to get in touch with emergency services, yet there were 2 emergency numbers on the refrigerator door. Furthermore, he could have simply made his way to the security control room at the main gate or stopped at a neighbor's house. The family had a dog who always barked when strangers were in the house, yet, according to Henri, she did not bark that night. Moving to the exculpatory factors, even though it's clear no intruders gained entry into the neighborhood, the killer could have lived in the neighborhood. Maybe this person was one of the residents. The neighbor who heard the argument said it wasn't the Star Trek movie that Henry had mentioned, yet she stated the noise went on for 2 hours and 10 minutes. The runtime for Star Trek Into the Darkness is 2 hours and 12 minutes. When Henry was talking to the emergency services operator, he mentioned that his sister was still alive. If he was the killer, why didn't he make sure that she was dead? He had no way to know with certainty that she would have no memory of the attack. When considering all the evidence in this case, do I think that Henry was guilty of murder? Yes, he was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, in my opinion. There is almost no doubt. What do I think happened in this case? This is just a theory, my opinion. Some type of argument occurred between Henry and his brother, or maybe his father. As Henry thought about the argument, he became increasingly angry. After everybody went to bed, he retrieved the axe and the knife and attacked his family. Rudy was the primary target and the first victim, even though this doesn't make much sense if Henry's motive was based on his allowance being cut off. One would think that his target would have been his father, not his brother. Henry tried to escape responsibility, but he decided to go with the intruder story. A more logical strategy would have been to claim that his brother or his father was the perpetrator of the attack. A mental health evaluation did not reveal any signs that Henry would be violent. His family was described as normal and loving. His mother wasn't happy in the marriage, but other than that, there were not any major problems. Henry said he respected his father and considered him to be an intellectual, but not good with emotions. He spoke highly of his mother. With any problems that he had, Henry felt comfortable approaching either parent. Henry had a lot of friends, including some in Australia, who he kept in touch with even after leaving. He didn't have any conduct problems when he was young, other than using drugs. Killing a parent is referred to as parricide. This crime is exceedingly rare. Only about 2% of homicides qualify as parricides. Only 10% of parricides are double parricides. This is where a child kills both parents. As far as the research on this phenomenon, Henry qualifies as an adolescent offender at 20 years old. This is rare even among parricides. Let's take a look at some of the characteristics of adolescent parricidal offenders and compare them to the facts of Henry's case. Adolescents who commit parricide are much more likely to have been mistreated by their victims as compared to non-offenders. Escape from harm is a common motive, yet that did not appear to be the motive in this case. Some offenders have antisocial personality traits. Based on his history, Henry really didn't appear to have many antisocial traits. Psychotic disorders like schizophrenia are often present, like the offender had hallucinations or delusions. Henry did not appear to be disorganized or have psychosis. The attacks often occur suddenly. Many consider this type of crime functionally impossible to predict. Henry's attack did appear to come out of nowhere. Adolescent parricidal offenders are more likely to attack other members of the family in addition to the parents, which was the case with Henry. What happened with Henry is a bit of a mystery. As I mentioned, this case probably comes down to impulsivity. Once Henry committed the first murder impulsively, he did not want to leave behind any witnesses. The other attacks were premeditated. He probably believed his sister was so injured that her survival was not possible. Henry's behavior is proof that all the security in the world is useless if dangerous people are allowed inside the house. The key to safety is identifying people who are dangerous, which is often the greatest challenge. Those are my thoughts on the case of Henri van Breda. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They consistently generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching.